When Mason inherits a lakeside cabin from a grandfather he never knew, he's drawn to the still waters that seem to whisper at night. Locals warn him not to swim, especially after sundown. But when he hears his mother's voice calling from beneath the surface, and she's been dead for 10 years, the lake becomes impossible to ignore. Something ancient waits below, and it remembers everything. Mason hadn't seen his grandfather in over 20 years. Not since he was 5, when his mother drove him out to a cabin near a lake, told him not to speak, and whispered, "Don't look into the water." He never knew why. But now, 2 decades later, that same cabin belonged to him. The will came out of nowhere. A letter from a lawyer in a town Mason didn't remember, addressed to Mason Ellsworth, sole heir to the Ellsworth property. There were no details, no conditions, just a key, a location, and a warning scribbled on a sticky note. Keep your windows closed at night, and never swim. Mason laughed it off at first. It felt like the kind of thing a weird old man would write before death, until he saw the place. The cabin sat alone at the edge of a still, dark lake. No neighbors, no boats, no birdsong, only trees. Thousands of trees, thick, wild, surrounding the lake like guardians. Their twisted branches creaked even without wind. The cabin itself looked frozen in time. Peeling paint, heavy wooden door, one front-facing window cracked at the corners, and just behind the house, only a few steps away, the lake. Wide, silent, black as ink. It didn't reflect the sky. It just stared back. Mason stepped out of his truck, gravel crunching underfoot. He paused. Somewhere, deep in the trees, something whispered. It was too soft to understand, too deliberate to ignore. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and damp wood. The furniture was covered in sheets. The air was heavy. He walked through the rooms slowly. Old portraits lined the walls, faces he didn't recognize. Most of them had their eyes scratched out. He paused at a photograph near the fireplace. His mother, young, smiling, standing beside the same lake. He hadn't known she ever came back here. Under the frame, someone had etched into the wood, "The water keeps what we give it." Caught. That night, Mason lit a fire and sat near the window, staring at the lake. It never moved, not a single ripple. Even the moon avoided it, casting shadows across the trees, but leaving the lake untouched. At 2:17 a.m., he heard it again. A whisper. But this time, it wasn't coming from the forest. It was coming from the water. He stepped outside barefoot, clutching a flashlight. The night was colder than expected, thick with fog, the kind that felt alive. He reached the dock behind the cabin, stepping slowly. The lake stretched endlessly in front of him, still, black, silent, until he heard it again. His name. Mason. Soft, female, familiar. He blinked. "Mom?" No response, only the sound of a single drop, like water falling from nowhere. And then, a shape. Floating beneath the surface, pale, motionless. Mason fell backward off the dock, but when he looked again, it was gone. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Mason visited the local diner in town, desperate for answers. The waitress, older, white hair, thick glasses, paused when he mentioned his grandfather. "Ellsworth's boy?" she asked slowly. "You're the one who got the lake house?" He nodded. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You hear it yet?" He hesitated. "What do you mean?" "The lake. It talks." Mason laughed awkwardly, but the woman didn't. "Your mother heard it too, before she disappeared." His blood ran cold. "She died in a car crash." The woman shook her head slowly. "That's what they told you." She handed him a receipt with 4 words written in shaky handwriting. "Ask about the drowned ones." Mason left without finishing his coffee. He drove back to the cabin in silence. But as he pulled up the gravel path, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. Wet footprints, leading from the edge of the lake to the front door. The footprints were still wet. Mason stared at them, frozen. They led from the lake to his front door, 12 distinct steps, barefoot, small, like a child's. But he was alone. He had locked the door before leaving that morning. Slowly, Mason followed the trail, heart pounding. The steps stopped at the door, then vanished. No sign of them turning back. Like whatever had walked up, had walked in. He unlocked the door with trembling hands. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. He walked through each room, flashlight in hand, even though it was midday. The dust in the air hung like mist. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing. The bathroom mirror was fogged. Someone had written in it, "You came back." His stomach twisted. He wiped the glass. But behind his reflection, another face, pale, wet, watching. He turned instantly. Nothing. Just the empty hallway. That night, Mason didn't light a fire. He sat on the edge of the dock, staring into the still blackness of the lake. No moon, no wind, no stars, just silence, the kind that hums deep in your bones. Then, a ripple. Something brushed the surface. He leaned forward. From the dark water, a single hand reached up. Small, pale, fingers curled like roots, then vanished. And with it came the whisper again. They never left. The next morning, Mason drove to the local library. He needed history, records, proof he wasn't losing his mind. There, in a dusty archive room, he found it. Ellsworth Lake Disappearances, 1952-1998. The file was thin, too thin. Inside, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and a photo of the lake taken decades ago. In the photo, a boy standing at the dock, staring into the water. Written on the back, they called them the drowned ones. You don't hear them until you're chosen. One article stood out. A woman had disappeared in 1997. Her name, Lillian Ellsworth, Mason's mother. According to the report, she had returned to the cabin briefly after years of absence and vanished without a trace. Authorities claimed she drowned in the lake, though no body was ever recovered. The official report? Likely suicide. But a journal entry found near her bed said something else. He's still there. The boy who never blinked. The whispers never stopped. I should never have brought Mason here. Mason's blood ran cold. He was 5 when she brought him. That night, the whispers grew louder. Not words, not exactly. Just murmurs of memory, regret, pain. He covered his ears. They got louder. The lake was pulling, calling. The dock creaked under invisible weight. He stepped outside, flashlight in hand, and walked slowly toward the water. And there, in the fog, stood a figure, soaking wet, wearing his mother's sweater. "Mom?" The figure didn't speak. It raised its head slowly. The face was hers, or something like it, but wrong. Empty eyes, gray skin, mouth too wide. Then she whispered, and it wasn't a voice. It was water speaking through flesh. "You left me here." Mason ran, back into the cabin. But when he closed the door, it didn't shut. Something caught it, a child's hand, wet, small. And as he forced the door closed, something sang from beneath the floorboards, a child's lullaby, out of tune, rotting. He didn't sleep. At sunrise, Mason walked to the dock again. There was something sitting at the edge. A doll, hand-stitched, ancient, soaked. A tag around its neck read, "For Mason, come home." The whispers started again, but now they weren't in the air. They were inside him. Mason didn't remember falling asleep, but he remembered waking up to the sound of gurgling. Not pipes, not wind. Breathing. Underwater. Breathing. It came from beneath the floor, the same spot where the singing had echoed the night before. He pressed his ear to the wooden boards. Silence. Then, a soft whisper. Let me up." He backed away slowly. That was his mother's voice, or at least, something trying to be her. He grabbed the doll from the table, the one that had been left on the dock, and threw it into the fireplace. It hissed like wet wood, and screamed. A high-pitched wail filled the cabin. Then it stopped. Smoke curled from the doll, now charred and half-melted. Inside its stuffing, human hair. That afternoon, Mason returned to the diner. The same old woman was there, waiting, like she knew he'd come back. She didn't ask what he saw. She slid a yellowed page across the table. "This is what the lake wants," she said quietly. "It's not death, it's memory." Mason scanned the paper. An old legend, a local folktale passed down by the tribes who once lived near the lake. There is a spirit beneath the black water. It is not a god. It is not a demon. It is older. It drinks memory. It eats grief. It keeps what people leave behind. The lake is its mouth. The whispers are what it chews. Mason looked up. "Why me?" The woman's eyes were glassy. "Because your mother made a deal." Back at the cabin, Mason searched the attic. Behind a false wall, he found a box. Inside, his mother's journals, each entry more desperate than the last. She wrote about dreams of drowning, of a boy watching her from beneath the surface, of bargains made when she was young and desperate. "I was pregnant. I was scared. I went to the lake and begged it to protect my son. It answered. But I didn't know what it would take." Mason's hands trembled as he turned the final page. If Mason returns, it will wake again, and it will want more. The lake wasn't haunted. It was alive, and it remembered him, because he belonged to it. That night, Mason heard footsteps on the roof, then on the stairs, then in the walls. He turned off every light, but the whispers didn't need light. They came from inside the mirror now, from inside his own voice. He ran outside, into the woods, away from the lake, but the trees, twisted, bent in impossible ways. The forest wasn't a way out. It was a circle. No matter where he turned, he came back to the same place, the dock. And standing at the edge, soaked, shivering, silent, was the boy. The one from the photo in the library. Small, soaked. Pale skin stretched tight. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, just bubbles. Then he pointed to the water and whispered, "It's waiting." Mason stepped forward, one foot on the dock, then another. The boy stepped backward into the lake, slowly sinking, eyes never blinking, fingers still pointing, then gone. And Mason? He didn't run. This time, he stepped into the water. At first it was cold. Then it wasn't water at all. It was thought, grief, memories. He saw his mother, as a child, crying by the water. He saw himself, a baby, floating in a crib made of driftwood. He saw the lake's surface ripple as something climbed in and never left. He opened his eyes, and he was underwater, but he could breathe. He stood on the lake floor, dry and cracked like an old desert. In front of him, a door, rusty, iron, ancient. It pulsed with heartbeat-like thuds, then a whisper, "Choose." Behind the door was the lake's heart, what it wanted, what it had always wanted, not souls, not blood, memory, and Mason had more than most. Mason stood before the door beneath the lake, not drowning, not cold, just still. The pressure around him was heavy, like being watched by something ancient. The water wasn't water anymore. It was memory itself. Every step stirred up thoughts he didn't remember having. Behind the iron door, something pulsed. Alive. He reached out. The metal was warm, and it breathed. A voice echoed through the water. Not loud, deep, like it lived in the bones of the world. "You are not the first." Mason spoke without sound. "What are you?" "I am what remains when people forget." He heard whispers, children, Mothers. A boy with eyes like mirrors. Why me? Because you remember. Just enough. The door opened on its own. Behind it was a room. No walls, no ceiling. Just a lake within the lake, stretching into forever. There, Mason saw them. The drowned ones. Dozens of them, men, women, children, floating upright in the water, still, watching. Among them, his mother. She looked the same as in the photograph, calm, beautiful, but empty. As Mason stepped forward, her head slowly turned. "I tried to save you," she whispered. Tears welled in his eyes. "You made a deal?" She nodded. "The lake protects what it takes. I gave it everything, but it still wanted you." "Why?" "Because you were the only one who could end it." The lake had fed on stories, on grief, loss, and silence. All these people, they weren't dead. They were held, trapped in the moment of forgetting, frozen memories, whispering. And Mason, he was the final thread, the only one who remembered all of them. He turned to the pulsing core of the lake, a mirror of black water. Beneath it, faces twisted in agony. The voice returned, "Leave and forget again, or stay and carry us all. Your memory is the key." Mason fell to his knees in the water. He saw everything. The day his mother left, the deal she made, the boy in the lake, his brother, lost before birth, offered to the water before Mason was born. He hadn't come here by chance. He was the debt. Mason whispered, "Then take me." The drowned ones stirred. The lake's heart began to beat faster. His mother reached for him. Her touch was warm, real. "Thank you." The lake began to collapse inward. Not violently, like an exhale. The faces vanished. The whispers stopped. The door dissolved. And Mason, he stood on the dock again, alone. But not empty. He remembered everything. Years later, the cabin sits untouched. No one goes near the lake anymore. Not because they're scared, but because they've forgotten it ever existed. Only Mason walks its edge now. He hears the whispers, but they're not begging. They're thanking him. Every night he lights a lantern and sets it floating on the lake, and beneath the water, eyes blink open. But they no longer hunger. They just watch. Story 2, The Prison That Shouldn't Exist. They said Graymore Penitentiary was torn down in 1987. They were wrong. There's something about abandoned places. They call to you, especially if you're a paranormal investigator with a YouTube channel starving for views. I've explored cursed houses, haunted hotels, even a supposed vampire crypt. But Graymore was different. We didn't even know it still existed. Until we received a mysterious email. No sender, no subject, just a short message. "If you want real fear, come to Graymore. Coordinates attached. Don't bring too many people, and don't stay past 3:00 a.m. That was it. No signature, no explanation, no joke. My crew, me, James, my cameraman Vic, audio tech Andrea, and skeptic-turned-psychic Leah all agreed we had to go. Graymore's secret. The prison was buried deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. Nowhere on Google Maps, no road signs, just miles of silence and snow. The locals didn't speak of it. We stopped at a gas station an hour before the site. The clerk stared blankly when we asked directions. Only when we were leaving, she muttered, "If you see cell 12, don't open it." We laughed it off. Nervous energy. That pre-shoot adrenaline. We were seasoned explorers after all. We'd heard it all before. First contact. We arrived just after 11 p.m. Graymore rose like a black tooth from the snow, its rusted gates open like a mouth. No guards, no walls, no do not enter signs. Just the cold. And the smell. It was like metal, mold, and something old. Not like dust, not like decay. Like rotting memory. We filmed everything. Andrea set up directional mics. Leah lit incense and began chanting softly, her protection thing. Vic flew the drone overhead. I walked straight through the gates with my flashlight and recorder, and that's when we heard it. A clang, echoing from the left cell block. Vic turned to me. "You heard that, right?" I nodded. But it wasn't the sound that bothered me. It was what followed. A voice. Soft. Male. Whispering. 1, 2, 3, 4. We froze. The prison was empty, wasn't it? Inside Graymore. We split into pairs. Vic and I went into Block B. Andrea and Leah took the chapel wing. The cells were lined like teeth, rusted shut, graffiti scrawled across the walls. But none of it was modern. Everything had been left the way it was. Mugs still sat on cell shelves, toothbrushes, faded Bibles, as if the prisoners had just vanished. I checked the floor plan. Cell 12, Block B, end of the hall. It was the only one, with the door open. I told Vic we'd film that one last. He agreed. We moved through the other cells, but my body kept turning back, like something was watching from that last cell. That's when Andrea's voice crackled through the walkie. "Leah's gone." Panic sets in. I clicked the walkie. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "She was just behind me. I turned around. She's not here. I swear I just heard a door slam and her scream." "Where are you?" "The chapel." We ran. I still remember the sound of our boots echoing off the walls, like we were running inside a cave carved by something ancient. The chapel doors were wide open, candles still flickering. Andrea stood trembling in the doorway. She was reading from that. She pointed to an open book on the altar. It wasn't a Bible. It was handwritten, old, tattered. One word repeated again and again. Wronged, 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 wronged. We searched the whole wing. Leah was gone. No footprints, no sound. Just that cold smell again, stronger. And then a voice from the hallway. She opened cell 12. We turned. Nobody there. But Vic. Vic's camera battery died instantly. That had never happened before. What comes next? We made the decision to keep filming, not just for the channel, but because we knew something was wrong. Leah wasn't the kind of person who wandered off. She believed in spirits. She respected them. If she screamed, it meant something had gotten to her. We didn't know it yet, but that night was only just beginning. Inside Graymore. We split into pairs. Vic and I went into Block B. Andrea and Leah took the chapel wing. The cells were lined like teeth, rusted shut, graffiti scrawled across the walls. But none of it was modern. Everything had been left the way it was. Mugs still sat on cell shelves, toothbrushes, faded Bibles, as if the prisoners had just vanished. I checked the floor plan. Cell 12, Block B, end of the hall. It was the only one, with the door open. I told Vic we'd film that one last. He agreed. We moved through the other cells, but my body kept turning back, like something was watching from that last cell. That's when Andrea's voice crackled through the walkie. "Leah's gone." Panic sets in. I clicked the walkie. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "She was just behind me. I turned around. She's not here. I swear I just heard a door slam and her scream." "Where are you?" "The chapel." We ran. I still remember the sound of our boots echoing off the walls, like we were running inside a cave carved by something ancient. The chapel doors were wide open, candles still flickering. Andrea stood trembling in the doorway. She was reading from that. She pointed to an open book on the altar. It wasn't a Bible. It was handwritten, old, tattered. One word repeated again and again. Wronged, 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 wronged. We searched the whole wing. Leah was gone. No footprints, no sound. Just that cold smell again, stronger. And then a voice from the hallway. She opened cell 12. We turned. Nobody there. But Vic. Vic's camera battery died instantly. That had never happened before. What comes next? We made the decision to keep filming, not just for the channel, but because we knew something was wrong. Leah wasn't the kind of person who wandered off. She believed in spirits. She respected them. If she screamed, it meant something had gotten to her. We didn't know it yet, but that night was only just beginning. Leah was gone. No footprints, no open doors, no sounds, just silence. Except for one thing, the words she read over and over from that ancient book in the chapel. Wronged. We gathered in the center wing of the prison. Andrea clutched the walkie in her hands, whispering her name. Leah, if you can hear me, say something. Static. Then, a high-pitched burst of feedback, sharp and unnatural, and from the prison's overhead speaker system came her voice. I didn't open it. It opened itself. We froze. There was no power in Graymore, no running electricity, no working speakers. We had checked everything. Vic dropped his flashlight. It clattered to the floor, flickering out. I could feel it. The air had changed, not cold, not warm, but pressurized, like the walls were holding in something angry, something alive. Andrea stared at the speakers. That was her, but it sounded distant, like she's underground. We all looked at the same place. Block B, Cell 12. The prisoner's diary. We made our way back, slowly. No one spoke. As we passed Cell 6, Vic stopped. There was something new. A book, half-burned, leather-bound, lying just outside the bars. He picked it up. Scrawled across the front in crude ink. E. Marrow, 1956. Inside were torn pages, shaky handwriting, and drawings. Mostly of a figure, no face, just a man with hollow eyes, always standing in the corner of a cell. The final entry read, The guards stopped coming. They say I killed the others. I didn't. But it comes for the wronged. It promised I'd be the last. Last, until someone else opens Cell 12. The air turned colder. I checked my camera, the battery, fully drained. Andrea's audio recorder, corrupted. Only Vic's film gear remained. Even then, his screen began glitching, little white bursts, like static, crawling across the edges. Cell 12. We reached the end of Block B. Cell 12 was still open. But now, something was inside, not moving, not speaking, but visible. A shadow, darker than the rest of the pitch-black room. Not a trick of light. This thing absorbed it. Andrea backed away instantly. Vic stepped forward and raised his camera, but the lens cracked. Not from a fall. It just cracked while he was holding it. I whispered, Leah? Nothing. I took one slow step forward, and that's when we heard her scream, not from the hallway, not from the cell. From the walls. Voices from the prison itself. The sound echoed through the vents. Her voice, strained, panicked, whispering the same word over and over. Underneath, underneath, underneath. Andrea turned to me, tears in her eyes. She's trapped. Wherever she is. It's not in this building. Vic grabbed the old prison floor map from the wall, one of those faded laminated directories. At the bottom corner was a red stamp. Sublevel D, sealed 1974. None of us had seen it before. There was a staircase, behind the warden's office. The office of the dead. The warden's office was untouched, a time capsule of rot and dust. Wooden furniture crumbled at the edges. An old nameplate read, Warden Elias Marrow. Same as the diary. There was a desk drawer, locked. Vic pried it open with a crowbar we brought. Inside was a key and a photograph. 4 guards, 1 prisoner, all faces scratched out, except the prisoner's. Leah's voice was faint again, now coming from the vent near the floor. He watches me when I sleep. His mouth doesn't move, but I still hear him. We followed the vent. It led to the back wall, where part of the paint had peeled. Vic scraped it off and found something carved into the cement. Do not descend. The key from the drawer matched the lock in the floorboard. I looked at the others. We go down. Together. Vic nodded. Andrea shook her head, but followed anyway. We opened the hatch. It screamed open like it hadn't moved in decades. Beneath it, a spiral staircase into pure black. And before we stepped down, we heard one last thing. Not Leah this time. A new voice, male, ancient, right behind us. Finally, someone remembered. The stairs to sublevel D groaned under our weight as we descended one by one, our flashlights slicing through a wall of thick darkness that refused to back away. The air changed immediately, dense, wet, and heavy with the smell of rust and rot. No one spoke. Every sound, even a breath, echoed like it was bouncing off walls too close to see. We had entered a place that hadn't seen light in decades, if ever. Andrea gripped my arm tightly, her steps uncertain. Vic led the way, his camera already glitching, even though we had changed the battery moments before. I brought up the rear, constantly checking behind us, half expecting someone, or something, to be following us down. Every few steps, we heard a low humming sound. Not machinery, not pipes. It was deeper. Organic. Like something alive. Murmuring. When we reached the bottom, the staircase ended in a narrow hallway, carved straight into stone. There were no prison bars, no signs, no electric lighting, just walls lined with old rusted chains and faded chalk markings, tally marks, strange symbols, and messages like, "They left us here," and "Feed him or he wakes." Vic filmed everything, though the screen flickered violently with every step forward. We found the first door on the left. It wasn't a cell. It was more like a containment chamber. The metal had warped inward, as if something had been trying to escape. Inside, we found a small cot, completely rotted through, and a pile of bones. Human, but not recent. At least, not until Andrea found the fingernails. They were fresh. Scratches lined the walls, deep and violent, as if someone had been trying to claw their way out just days ago. That's when we heard it. Leah's voice. Again. But this time, she wasn't whispering. She was sobbing. We rushed down the hallway, following her cries. They echoed from every direction, disorienting and overlapping. She was repeating one thing over and over. "It wears his face. It wears his face." We turned a corner and the hallway split into two. Vic went right. I took left with Andrea. Suddenly, Andrea froze. She pointed at the wall. "That wasn't there before," she whispered. A new symbol had been scrawled into the stone, still dripping. Fresh. It looked like an eye carved into the center of a triangle, with 6 lines shooting outward. It pulsed faintly with a reddish glow. Before we could speak, Vic's scream echoed down the hall. We ran. He was standing in front of a locked cell, backing away, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Inside the cell, crouched in the far corner, was a figure. Small, barely moving. It was Leah. We called her name. She didn't respond. Vic reached for the bars, and that's when she lifted her head. It wasn't Leah anymore. Her eyes, pitch black as if hollowed out. Her skin pale, lips torn from what looked like screaming for hours. And then she smiled. Not the expression. The smile moved across her face, stretching too far, too long, like her skin wasn't hers. We pulled Vic away. She stood up in the cell, eyes locked on us, and then she said something that didn't belong to her voice at all. "Wronged men, rotted place. You brought light where only darkness belongs." The lights flickered, then shut off completely. Silence. And then, footsteps. From behind. Heavy. Slow and deliberate. We turned, expecting to see a guard, another prisoner, anything human. What we saw instead, I still can't describe it properly. It was tall, too tall to belong in this narrow space. Its body looked stitched together like it was wearing pieces from different people. A hood covered its face, but where its eyes should have been, 2 red orbs burned through the dark. The air around it bent slightly like heat waves, but it was freezing cold. It didn't run. It didn't scream. It moved toward us, step by step, like it knew we couldn't escape. Andrea screamed. Vic dropped his camera. I grabbed both of them and ran. We didn't think. We just moved, turned corners, crashed into walls, stumbled through puddles that stank of blood and sewage. Finally, we reached a door marked Warden Quarters, sub-level. I threw it open and slammed it shut behind us. We collapsed inside, gasping for air. The room was covered in photos, hundreds of them, mugshots, prisoners, guards, even children, and in the center of the wall, one large photo, framed. It was Leah. Same clothes, same face, but the date stamped at the bottom, 1957. She had never been in our time. The whispers began again, right outside the door. Knock, knock, 3 times, and then silence. Andrea was crying now. This isn't real, she kept whispering. This isn't real. But it was, and we still had no way out. Only one option remained. Go deeper. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. The room was thick with dust and memories that didn't belong to us. Around us, hundreds of photos stared down, faces twisted in fear, some blurred as if they'd screamed while the shutter clicked. And right in the center, Leah's face, perfectly captured in a photo dated nearly 70 years ago. Vic kept repeating, "It doesn't make sense. That's not possible. She was just with us." But deep down, we all knew. Graymore didn't follow the rules of time. Andrea flipped through a drawer beneath the photo wall and pulled out a file. It was yellowed and damp, but the name printed on it was clear. Leah M. Hart, admitted 1956, convicted for arson. We all froze. "Convicted?" Andrea whispered. "That can't be our Leah." But then Vic said something that sent chills through me. She never told us her last name. And just like that, all the little things we ignored came rushing back. Her strange connection to the place. How she always knew which way to go. Her obsession with Cell 12. Leah didn't just visit Graymore. She returned. The whispers returned. This time they weren't just outside the door. They were inside the room, echoing from the walls, the photos, even the floor beneath our feet. Andrea's flashlight flickered, then died completely. We sat in total darkness. Then, a voice, calm, deep, and right behind me. Some were wrongfully punished, others were never punished enough. I turned slowly. No one there. But the temperature dropped instantly. I could see my breath hanging in the air, swirling unnaturally, like something was inhaling it. Then the door creaked open on its own. A long hallway stretched ahead. It hadn't been there before. Stone walls, flickering torches, and at the far end, a single glowing symbol on the wall. The same eye triangle from before. Andrea grabbed my hand. "We have to finish this." We walked forward. The hallway led into a wide underground chamber, domed and lined with cells. In the center stood an altar built from old stone and rusted metal bars, welded together like a cage turned inside out. Atop the altar was Leah, or something wearing her face. She smiled when she saw us, not a friendly smile, but a hollow one, like someone wearing a mask too tight. "I didn't mean to come back," she said, "but they remembered me." Andrea stepped forward. "Leah, what happened to you?" Leah's smile faded. "They blamed me for the fire. I didn't do it. But once you're locked away in Graymore, you don't get to tell your side. You just wait until the walls start talking back." She looked down at her hands, which were no longer human, more like burnt paper curled at the edges. I became part of this place, like the others. Story 3. The Room That Wasn't There. Elena wasn't the type to believe in ghosts. She worked 2 jobs, lived off caffeine, and didn't have time for things that went bump in the night. So when she moved into the cheap 3rd-floor apartment on Rivington Street, the only thing she cared about was the rent. And maybe the view. The listing said 2-bedroom, 1 bath. But when the landlord handed her the keys and walked off with a grunt, Elena stood in the doorway confused. There was only 1 door in the hallway. 1 bedroom. She walked the apartment twice. 1 bedroom, no second door, no extra room. Just a long, narrow hallway that ended at a blank wall. She even tapped on the wall, thinking maybe there was a closet. Solid. Maybe the listing was old. Maybe they remodeled. She shrugged it off. But that night she couldn't sleep. The apartment felt off. Not haunted. Just slightly wrong. Like furniture that was an inch too far from where it should be. At exactly 3:12 a.m., she heard something. Not footsteps, not creaks. Just a click, like a door unlatching. She sat up. The hallway was dark. She turned on the light. At the end of the hallway, where the wall had been earlier, there was a door. She blinked hard. It was old. Wooden, no handle, no peephole, just a silver keyhole. She approached slowly, barefoot on cold wood. Her pulse ticked faster with every step. When she touched the door, it was warm. She pressed her ear against it. Nothing, just silence. Then, thump. Something knocked back. She stumbled away. The door vanished. Gone. Just the wall again. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, she asked her landlord about the extra bedroom. "You said this place had 2, she asked. "Was one of them sealed up?" He looked confused. "No. Always been a 1 bed. You sure you read the listing right?" "I've got a screenshot." He waved her off. Maybe it was a typo. Happens. Elena didn't argue, but she knew what she saw. That night, the door came back. Same time. 3:12 a.m. This time it was slightly open. A sliver of pitch-black air between the door and the frame. No sound, no breeze, no explanation, just blackness, like the world had a hole in it. She stared at it for a long time. Then, she made a mistake. She stepped inside. The floor was soft, not carpet, wrong, like moss or mold. The walls were too close, and when she turned around, the door was gone. No exit, only the room. It was completely black except for a faint light at the center of the floor. A circle, drawn in chalk. Inside it, a chair, facing the wall. Someone was sitting in it, motionless. Elena's breath caught. She whispered, "Hello?" The figure didn't move. She stepped closer, heart pounding. The figure was pale, long dark hair, thin arms, wearing her clothes. It looked just like her. Then it whispered, "You took my life." Elena woke up on the floor of her apartment. Not in bed, not on the couch, just the floor, right in front of the hallway. The door was gone again. Only the smooth, unbroken wall remained, as if it had never opened, as if she had never walked through it. But something had changed. Her socks were wet, and under her nails, chalk dust. She rushed to the mirror. At first, her reflection looked normal, but when she turned her head, her reflection didn't. It just stared back, smiling. She stumbled away, clutching the edge of the sink, trying to breathe. "This isn't real. I'm just sleep-deprived." She called a friend, but every time she dialed the number, her phone reset to 3:12 a.m. Again and again, no matter what time it was. That night, she didn't sleep. She waited by the hallway, staring at the blank wall. 3:12 came, and the door returned. Only this time, it slammed open. Not slowly, not mysteriously, just violently like it was done waiting. The room was pitch black again. No light, no chair, just darkness. And deep inside, footsteps, coming closer. Elena backed away, whispering to herself, "No, no, no." Then, a voice, her voice, from inside the room. "I'm still here." The door shut. The wall returned. She screamed. The next morning, she went to a local records office. She needed to know who lived here before her. The receptionist, an older man with sunken eyes, pulled up the records. His face paled. "This unit, it's been vacant for 9 years. That's not possible. The last tenant, she disappeared, left everything behind, said she saw someone in the mirror who wouldn't stop smiling. What was her name? Elena Vargas." She froze. "That's my name." The man looked up, confused. "Sorry, must be a mix-up. Just a coincidence." But it wasn't. She left the building, and her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. One word. Trade. That night, Elena covered the hallway with furniture, chairs, boxes, bookshelves. She taped the light switch down, and for a while everything was quiet, until... knock. 3 times, from inside the wall. The hallway light turned on its own, and every photo in her apartment fell to the ground. When she picked one up, it had changed. It was a picture of her, standing in front of the second room's door. But she had no eyes. She ran to the mirror. This time, her reflection didn't show up at all. Only the door. It was there, inside the mirror. And someone on the other side was watching her, eyes wide, lips moving, mimicking her every word. Except, its mouth moved before hers. She threw the mirror to the floor. Glass shattered, but her reflection remained, smiling on every broken shard. Elena started recording herself. She set up her phone at night, aimed down the hallway, determined to catch proof of the door. To prove, if not to others, then to herself, that she wasn't losing her mind. At 3:12 a.m., the video stopped. Not cut. Stopped. When she reviewed the footage the next morning, it showed her sleeping, peacefully, until she wasn't. At 3:11, she sat up. At 3:12, she stood and walked toward the wall. Then she vanished, like the hallway swallowed her. But Elena didn't remember leaving her bed. Yet her feet were dirty, her clothes damp, and under her pillow, a key. Old. Heavy. Cold to the touch. It didn't fit any lock in her apartment. Later that day, the hallway light flickered, in broad daylight. The door was there again, this time wide open, no hesitation. Elena stepped in. Inside, the room was no longer empty. The chalk circle was larger now. More symbols surrounded it. Spirals, eyes, impossible letters. At the center, a mirror, just like the one she broke. Only this one was taller, older, and in its reflection, her apartment. She could see herself standing there watching the mirror, even though she was clearly inside the room. It didn't make sense. Then the reflection blinked. But not at the same time as her. It stepped forward out of sync, tilted its head the opposite way. It smiled and whispered, "She remembers now." Elena turned to run, but the door had vanished again. She banged on the walls, screamed. No sound came out. Then she saw the chalk symbols slowly glow, and the room began to hum. The mirror showed other people now, flashes of them. A girl crying in a corner, a man clawing at his skin, a child whispering at the wall. All of them stuck. All of them had become part of the room. The whisper returned. Louder. Not a voice. A chorus. "You took her place. She wants it back." Suddenly, Elena remembered something she was never supposed to recall. She wasn't the original tenant. She was the reflection. The one left behind years ago. The real Elena had escaped. The door closed behind her. And this Elena, the one living now, wasn't real. She backed away from the mirror in horror. The reflection stepped forward and pressed its hand to the glass. "You have her name. You have her life. But I'm the real one." And then, from the darkness, a second door opened. A voice called, "You can stay." or you can trade. Elena turned to the new door. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Behind it, she could feel everything she had stolen. Memories, moments, time that wasn't hers. She had been living borrowed time, and the room had been waiting to collect. She asked aloud, "What happens if I stay?" The voice from the mirror answered, "You become part of the room. And if I trade?" She takes her life back, and she would disappear. Everything she'd lived, felt, loved, gone. She was a shadow of someone else's survival. The question wasn't whether the room would take her, it was whether she'd give herself back. Elena stood at the threshold of the second door. The mirror behind her whispered with dozens of voices, all sounding like her but distorted, echoing different lives, different timelines. She could see herself on the other side of the glass, smiling sadly. That Elena, the real one, looked older, tired. And behind her, Elena glimpsed flashes of her old apartment, her job, her memories. They didn't belong to her. They never had. The chalk symbols pulsed beneath her feet, glowing like veins under skin. The room was alive, waiting. She whispered, "If I go, will she remember me?" The mirror answered in a chorus, "She already does. That's why she came back." The door ahead creaked open. A thin light spilled from it. Not warm, not cold, just hollow. Elena turned back one last time and saw her reflection step away from the mirror. "I'm sorry," the real Elena said. "You don't have to be," she replied. "I do. I left you behind. I thought I closed the door for good. I didn't know." Their voices blended into one another. They weren't enemies. They were echoes of the same moment. One survived, one remembered, and one had to stay. Elena took a breath and stepped through the second door. She expected pain, but instead she felt emptiness, as if her name, her story, her weight in the world was slowly being lifted away. She looked down and saw her body fading, translucent, unwritten. She wasn't dying, she was being forgotten. On the other side of the mirror, the original Elena gasped awake in her bed, sweat-soaked, breathing hard. The apartment was normal again. No door, no hallway light flickering, no whispering mirrors. She walked to the kitchen. There was coffee in the pot, already brewed, a soft hum of traffic outside. Everything felt real, but when she passed the hallway, she paused. Something felt missing, like she had left something behind, or someone. She looked in the mirror. Her reflection smiled, but not the same way she did. Far below the surface of memory, in a room without doors, a girl sat cross-legged on the chalk circle. She had no name, but she remembered everything. She remembered both lives, the one she lived and the one she gave away. The mirror in the room showed no reflection now, only the door, waiting for the next person, waiting for the next trade. Because the room doesn't take people, it takes stories, and Elena's was just the latest.